Hello, mamas from around the world, and welcome to Mothering in the Darkness, where our inspiration is igniting you. And today I'm introducing you and inviting you to my Contemplation Station because that is the way that I can best come to you now. In my darkness of over 20 years of studying human behavior, human development, is that I completely overwhelm myself with the perspectives of psychology and Eastern um, wisdom or healing techniques and human development from many different perspectives and levels that I got paralysis analysis, or I had the first world problem of too many options until I realized in my darkness that the way of thinking that has created the space that is igniting me to do my uniqueness is contemplation, because it is an open space that allows so many different levels of thinking, explorations of beliefs or mythologies to be presented to us, but for us through our unique self to see what resonates with us. Because as much as our darkness is a place of feeling trapped or unknowing, it can be unbearable and incredibly negative, it's also the place of a dormancy, where the elements of us that are unknown, that have been untapped or to be discovered, also reside. And there is no sugarcoating around the darkness, because that would be very dishonorable, because it does indeed feel and is experienced as real and in reality. And the tension between the dualistic options can sometimes be our downfall, or lead to even darker darkness, the darkness in the darkness. And so in my overwhelmment of which perspective to come from, I realized that contemplation is really where I, as Malcolm Gladwell would say, have gotten my 10,000 hours. And the space that I've experienced in being able to contemplate and consider and entertain so many different options, even ones that veer from the timeline or the structure that I was brought up in, doesn't get overwhelming when I am coming from me. So don't worry if you see things in this contemplation station that you don't resonate with, or maybe even feel that they are against your belief system, because you're never going to be required to believe in any of these in their fixedness. But what we do is rather use any inspiration that has resonated to open up the multiple layers of us, opportunity, reality, but most of all, to understand the sweetness in the multifaceted of you, because there's, what now, over 8 billion yous out there, which is significant. So thank you so much for coming to contemplate with me today. Contemplation is our first topic, and every episode we will look at different topics that help us see through our mother portal, and that the dynamics of that relationship and what it is igniting in us, and where it's we might be at the point where we in the dark side of being ignited. so that we can experience more openness and more like our diluted self, you know, what we taste like when it's just us, what we feel like when it's just us. And so none of these are the belief system or the school of thought that we are interested in. You are what we are interested in, and we'll take or leave as we explore. So contemplation is a way of thinking, really, that is the ability to hold more than one, often opposing idea, situation, perspective, feeling at the same time, right? So because you are the muse and you are the focus, and igniting you is what we are here to do, we're going to start off with your own timeline through me demonstrating mine. So I was born, I'm a 1977 girl, okay? So I grew up in the 80s, all right? And at that time, I grew up in Johannesburg, South Africa. And at that time, which I believe was probably quite global in the Western world, thinking and how we thought about thinking was largely, I suppose, looked at from a few aspects of intelligence, and there definitely was some space for emotion. It got bigger and it got better, and maybe has gone beyond the point, but and you know, depending if you were around like quite open-minded people, there was also acknowledgement of like gut instincts and trust in your gut, and so these were the levels of thinking that we were trained into, and so think about when you were born, because you might have been born when the consciousness of discussing intuition was available, or you might have been born before emotions were discussed. And so find out where you were, and while we are doing our contemplation, get a sense of whether, I'm not going to say whether you are like, you know, a linear, literal, realistic thinker, or whether you are a big picture thinker, because you're both, you'll find. But notice in your own timeline sort of what you've got more practice in, and what resonates with you, and what piques your curiosity, because there is definitely so much beauty in thinking between opposites and making plans, and you know, being able to see that if I do this, then that will happen, the action and the reaction. The thing is that it is 0.901%, I'm talking about dualistic thinking now, of the contribution towards the information that we are receiving and processing. And it's about us. We are our favorite and our central topic of information, whichever way we're looking at it. So it's good to discover it, to explore it, and not to get too attached to any of it. So let's begin with like where thinking was when you came into this world, because being able to explore in the darkness will ask us to have the flexibility, or it will introduce the flexibility on where we can move, and knowing what you're working with will bring the most amount of significance and meaning and opportunity to you. So when we, on my timeline in the 80s, the way that the mind was sold to us was actually just one element of the brain. They were referring to our conscious thought, when they said, have you lost your mind? And we'll forgive, because to date, even with all our exploration into the science of the soul and the science of the mind and human behavior, we still don't have a definition of the mind. And perhaps it's more, I suppose, a visual image that can loosely capture this. Is perhaps it's kind of like the universe, in that there's parts of it that we know of and how it works together. And that has expanded rapidly over the last 30, 40 years. And I'm sure over time it has been expanding rapidly. But it's significant. It's significant to us on what we do know, and updating why we think. Not because we have to create the other elements of our mind. They are dormant. They're there. But depending where we came in and what our experiences have been, and our nature and our personality, and so many nuances in the story of you, shape what we think and how we think. And darkness really is a thought space and a thought belief. And because it feels so real, it can actually be experienced as a location or a time period. So let's see what we can do to honor and maximize and mine this darkness, so that the dark black sky starts feeling like it's got some stars going on in it. So certainly I was born in a time where our conscious thought was revered, valued, and instilled, because intelligence, or the understanding of intelligence, or the aspects of intelligence that, I suppose if I had to look at it at its crudest level, the economy required from its people, was that we are sharp in math, language, business, and there was a spirit of well-roundedness in terms of music and arts, and there was an emphasis on religious instruction. At times, it was even open enough to be called theological, But yeah, that was some of the forms of intelligences that were amplified and processed and instilled when I was educated in the 80s. It's also worthwhile to consider really the level of, let's say, strictness that you were born into, because contrary to my children's experience, there was a high expectation of cooperation, and cooperation was valued, and success in certain cooperation was valued more than others. So the emphasis on education and certain elements of education and certain elements of knowledge and certain perceptions definitely will speak to how much flexibility we have and how we feel in the darkness. But most of all, what I love about the difference between the timeline I was born into and the timeline now is that it's actually safe to talk about it, and it's possible to talk about our darkness. And so I come to you foot toots. It's a saying that we have in South Africa. It's a saying when, like, this is the price that I'm selling, say, my house for, and it's foot toots. So no, I'm not going to be fixing the leaking roof, or we're not going to be deducting anything from it. We come as we are, as is. And it's a beautiful demonstration of moving out of a darkness, which has been unique to me, and it has been global to all of us as we are navigating through the exposure of so much darkness in our collective as well as in our personal. So I'd like this time to just say thank you to all of you for coming at this time on our earth and doing this global shake-up together. I appreciate the company, and there is an element of freedom as when we go through periods of darkness that are unique, we tend to feel even more alone, that I'm the only one. But going through, even though it's massive and it's global and it's overwhelming, it has created a bit of an openness that I'm not alone, and it's not just because of my personal failures and inadequacies that I find myself in my darkness, and also that it is okay to speak about it, and we don't start failing at what we were taught what was success, and in that we ignite you, and by creating the space to do that. So a very interesting development, if you were born in the 90s, is that intuition would have been something that, and collective conscious, that would have been started to be speaking about, which brought in some very helpful information about what our heart and our stomach and our brain do for us, because in the 80s we were coming from the perspective that basically our brain was our computer, and all our intelligence was located in our brain. In fact, it was called the mind, right? And what we have discovered as we created a tolerance for emotions and the exploration of emotions and instinct and trust in a personal sense that comes from something within our being, is the wonderful discovery that all the neurons, the actual cellular structure that is in our brain, located in the brain matter, there are actually more of those neurons and those processes going on in our heart and our gut. Right? So previously, where we valued education as knowledge that we read and we understand it, the reason we know we understand it is because we can explain it. Okay, so we can put it into words and we can speak it, and it will hopefully in some way make sense. Okay, which is linear, all right? And with the introduction of realizing that our heart area is computing and receiving information that goes beyond what we are reading and able to put into words and speak to understand, and that our gut is also bringing in information that, when we say, like, I just know it, that is us. You see, we haven't had to create the place where we just know. That's us just tuning in at a space before we are understanding in terms of words and speaking. So in the 80s, understanding so that you can articulate it was incredibly valued. By 10 years later, there was a lot more space for us to accept in a formal setting, like a business meeting, like a parenting meeting, like a doctor's meeting, where we can say, I don't know why, but I just know. So that started opening up channels for more of our intelligence to at least come in and be practiced. So to come out of the dormancy and to come into action and to ignite us. And yeah, for those who were born before the 70s, I know that it was a time that at least many people, what they experienced is the whole children should be seen and not heard, and emotions weren't even really discussed, let alone the nuances of the emotions. And so it's understandable how anger kind of became an acceptable emotion to express, and that got a little bit, well, it's gotten very distorted. But you are either angry or happy, or you're sad or you're happy. And as we've opened up different understandings of emotion, different nuances of emotion, we're actually able to receive more information. And there is beautiful work if you are curious and interested in this, because it comes from a perspective that is actually not emotional, that can help ground emotions, particularly when our emotions are intense or they're triggering a trauma response, or they've been practiced so much that it doesn't feel that there are options for it to move past. Because on a level, emotions are energy in motion. And Dr. David Hawkins, I'll write that there, Dr. David Hawkins, David R. Hawkins, wrote one of his books is Power versus Force, and in this book he goes into the scientific explanation of how they learned to measure the speed, so the actual energy output that different emotions have, different texts. So I know that he measured, like, for example, the Torah, the Bible, some of the books, I think he did the DSM for psychology, which is a diagnostic manual, so they measured the speed at what energy moves at, what information moves at. And so, yeah, for a deep dive into the hows around that, you can look into Power versus Force, or the Eye of the Eye, by Dr. David Hawkins, and understand or satisfy that part of your brain that is beautiful but loves facts, because it does help things land in a different way if you know how you love to receive information, or exploring all the different ways that you do. So basically what Dr. Hawkins tells us is that on his measurement chart of calibration, one that goes from 0 to 1,000, right? With 0 being stop and 1,000 being like the fastest. He places on one of his tables, he places emotions, and he has shame round about 40, and there's peace is round about 500. All right, and what he realized is the speed of something moving under 200, okay, because it's slow, okay, is in a space where it is destructive. So it is moving too slowly. It slows things down, okay, not to be misconstrued as bad, but it slows things down because that's the speed that it goes at. I know we have anger is a bit faster than shame, and then we'll have like disappointment. There's depression and anxiety come in, forgive me for not being precise about their speeds, but I know that irritation and aggravation come just before the 200 mark, which is boredom, and then moves into you are starting to move at a speed that is creative. All right, once you start moving, and it all starts with curiosity. So in the 80s, curiosity wasn't necessarily listed as one of the intelligences, but curiosity is such a divine intelligence because it really is the door opener, and it leads you there. And curiosity employs the intelligence from the information that's coming from your gut, that's coming from your emotion, that's coming from your cellular memory, that's coming from your talents and your favorites and your personality. And often, I mean, could even be doing a reading of your environment around you and recognizing, the time is right for this. So once we start moving at faster speeds, we go into space of creativity and are in the proximity of, we're driving in the lane of and within the proximity of others who are in this space. So the loveliness of this understanding is that we don't take the dark and get rid of it, or the unwanted and the unbearable and get rid of it. What we do is we add speed to it. So we bring more and more light to it. And while in the 80s, in this dualistic right, wrong, good, bad, success, failure space, something that was created was an idea, or at least I took it in that way, in the either or thinking, is that when you are angry, you're better when you feel peace. Whereas now what I think has opened up is an appreciation that something slightly faster than anger is disappointment, something slightly faster than that is irritation, something slightly faster than that is boredom, and then curiosity. And within that, there's just an appreciation for the way we move up and the way we move down, and we're not asking ourselves to do an unrealistic jump. And also, we're not looking out at ourselves in a place where we're feeling depressed and marking it against peace. We're allowed to just take the next step into anger and celebrate that that's a step up. Maybe that's what the old adage or wisdom of it's not about the outcome, it's about the journey. Because when we have the experience of going from anger to peace all of a sudden, we don't have the experience that we were personally involved in it. So peace doesn't become something that I know myself to be true about me, that it is something that is just dormant in me. It feels like something that the heavens bestowed on me, or the luck of the god, because my beautiful mind that thinks linearly doesn't understand, and so it can't take agency, and it can't have lasting peace because it doesn't know how it jumped. So the expectation is unrealistic, which is beautiful because it creates space for us. And when our emotions are seen as energy in motion, then it creates the space which judgment takes away on, like, should I be feeling fearful, or is it okay to be angry? And allows you to investigate and work in a very different way. So that's a nice little contemplation on that. Sometimes the reason why our darkness feels real and feels very trapped is because of, how we've thought about it or been taught to think about it rather. And that when we stay here and think a little bit, that we can find the next step in front of us that might still feel like it it is dark or slow or low, but it's not necessarily absent of light. It's not necessarily being stuck. And we are not sugarcoating because, or if you prefer different language, we're not psychologically in denial or spiritually bypassing, but mostly we're not dishonoring a part of us that is true. And it's not that it's dark as in it's bad, it's just that it is on the spectrum of who we are, and where we are. So the how we think is really important, and I think if you can connect in with the aspect of you that is a big thinker, when we overwhelm ourselves in the bigger picture, which is the opposite of the details, we feel ungrounded because because maybe what was drilled into us is the way you know who you are. Know who you are. Know where you're going. Know what you want. They're all important and they're all beautiful, but they're all incomplete because what contemplation allows is for all the different levels and many different truths to reveal what is true for us. And the emphasis on, if you don't know what you want to study, for example, if you don't know what you want to be, if you don't know what job you want, then you are lost. And so contemplation, Rumi's got that beautiful quote of, beyond the shores of right and wrong, there is a garden. I'll meet you there. And this is the space that we speak about, but going into that space might not have been encouraged or just on the radar when you were born. And to go and get lost in thought, to entertain possibilities that may not be at the space where we understand them in terms of we can put words to it and speak it, or there's scientific proof about it. Be open. Be open to having a little look there at what role that plays for you. There's nothing you have to do about it, because the beauty is, you can just notice it, and that little subconscious and unconscious, and our mind just wants to serve us. It's here for not only our survival but our expansion and our growth, and it is our ally when we use it, more and more of it together. And a lot of the things that were taught to us as a virtue, like love or like kindness or like doing the right thing, and a lot of our virtue did come out of religious teaching, because it was taught to us as a virtue. All right, it became an action, a behavior. It became very linear. But what most of those virtues are actually a power. And when you're able to go into a contemplation around not being able to live in the virtue, or the virtue not making sense to you, or not being able to explain it to your children, or when living the virtue is giving you that polar experience, which a virtue can only give you, where you seeing yourself as kind, and then you have an experience of being incredibly unkind, and then you're like, where am I? Oh, I'm lost because I can't trust myself to be kind. So that's just a little example. But kindness or virtue is not here as a virtue. It's a power, all right, that is dormant within you, and that is definitely something that we'll be exploring, so that you and the uniqueness of you and the power that is being coming out for you, through you, for this time, may be more apparent to you and come out and play a little bit with you. And there are a lot of techniques out there and how-tos and step by, which are beautiful and a part of it. And yeah, we often just need a grid or a structure to ground us, to ground what we find in our contemplation. But yeah, what happens is the darkness and the light don't cut each other out, all right? The darkness gathers momentum and it alchemizes, it gathers speed, and then it moves into the light. And that is when we start having an authentic experience of ourselves as the creator. That it's not a matter of, oh, thank God we're going through a peaceful time, let us just enjoy it and wait for the other shoe to drop. There's an actual connection of, I know where I find my peace, and I know how to connect with it. And it is known to me as a power, so that even when I'm having an experience that is not very peaceful, the knowing of peace and the experience of peace, which we've experienced not just in our thinking mind, which we've experienced and acknowledged on all levels of our body and our information system, for true knowledge, for knowing, you know. And so the why we do it is what's going to help our brain, and whichever timeline that we are coming from, whichever stuckness or trappedness that we think we are stuck in, the why and not so much the how or the what is really what creates the space of contemplation, the garden, for you to come forward. And that is because the why is when we are able to hold one or more opposing perspectives within us, and not feel the need to come to a right and a wrong on it, but to take both the right and the wrong and let it unlock and reveal deeper levels of information, or help us take that step forward, is the experience of compassion, not the virtue. It is compassion is the ability, which can be called acceptance, to stop separating opposite, and to make it one spectrum, so that we can move between the two and help them move and work for us. And the outcome of that, or the bonus of that, is a level of compassion we feel, not because we are being compassionate, but because we are compassionate. And that is our balance, that is our caring, that is our empathy, that evokes out of us from the space of compassion. And in the shared desire that we can feel connection on every level of our life. Connection on one level is feeling that we belong to our tribe or our culture, and the next one is feeling a sense of belonging and place and purpose within our family and our immediate community, and with our lovers or our partners and our one-on-one relationships. And on the next level, it's feeling a connection with ourself, okay? The self we are, and not the self we were taught we were, which is not a bad self, it's just an incomplete self, but it doesn't give us a feeling of connection. Unless who we thought we were was so spot on and so resonated with us, then we do feel that deep sense of connection. You know, on another level, connection is feeling it in an empowered, greater connection to, love itself, to growth itself, to possibility, to the connection of what we would want for all, the connection with how I really feel, what I really want, and what I would like to offer. And on another level, it's connection with being able to speak. And, when I speak my truth, I am met with a connection from someone else, which is just beautiful. I mean, it's home. And often having the experience of speaking and being misunderstood takes away that feeling of connection. And then, of course, the connection we feel, which is, on one level, they speak about our third eye. But on another level, it's kind of just like our whole integrated self, the all of it together, but not shouting, just coming together, and we can kind of feel the information of what we feel and inspired to do, what we intuitively know, with what we've studied intelligently, with people we can discuss it with, and we just feel the connection between the parts of our very multi-layered self, and then connection to the biggest picture, and feeling a part of that. And so, being able to explore, even if it's just for the sake of being able to notice what is already there, and that I do actually tap into and participate and action and demonstrate a lot of things that are very beautiful and powerful and were there anyway. They just haven't necessarily caught my attention or the attention of the social program. So thank you if you've stayed with me for my first contemplation, and thank you for letting me be in raw and ready and authentic to coming out of my darkness as a Robin, as a mom, as a being with you. And every episode or session, whatever you like to call it, we're going to pick another topic. I'll just take the one off the top for us to explore. Beautiful. Let me put it here. We're going to look at, I suppose it's a provocative statement. Stop improving yourself. The only part of you it provokes rather is your brain and your dualistic thinking, or if you came from a conservative 1980s perspective, where self-improvement and success was the driving force. And it certainly is, but it is to a certain point only. And let us contemplate in our next session where that is for you, how it is for you, and what is working for you. And yeah, let's create some space to ignite you. Mums, I'm so, so, so grateful that you stayed with me, and that we have completed our first contemplation together. I look forward to so many more, and send in huge amounts of love to all of you. And until next time, I love you lots.